Renegade Thinkers. Now, normally, when I start an episode, I have prepared. I've talked to the guest. We know exactly what we're going to talk about. We're ready to really get into a subject right away. So here's the irony of this situation. 9 months ago, literally February 6th, 2020, I had my prep call with Latané Conant, the CMO of 6 Cents. And we had a really interesting conversation, and we were talking about her approach to job interviews, where she insists on having her CEO, her future CEO, interview past bosses, which I thought, oh my God, that's amazing. That's a really cool thing. We can have a whole conversation on that. So here we are 9 months later, like nothing's really happened between February and September 2020. And I want to welcome Latané to the show. And hey, stay with us because who knows where this is going to go. How are you?
I'm good. I'm sorry it took 9 months to get our show done.
Yeah. So, but I'm just guessing you had nothing else to do. I mean,
No,
it's been
I've
such
been
an
just
easy 9 months.
relaxing by the beach.
Yeah, pretty cool. That's pretty much like I've been doing. Let's just take the time off. And it's so easy to vacation these days. So first, just ground us. Where are you physically right now?
So I am physically in Glenview, Illinois, which is a suburb north of Chicago.
I know it. And okay. And we're just starting to see glimpses of fall there. Cool. So here's an easy question. What have you learned in the last 9 months?
I was just on a virtual event with Sendoso called Out of the Box, and one of the slides said the titles was "The more things change, the more they stay the same," and that was what we talked about. I believe.
Go ahead.
I think the more things have changed, the more they stay the same, and it's sort of a good reset for marketing teams to get back to some of the basics of what marketing does.
Interesting. Let's break that down a little bit, because I want to agree with you, but I also know that there's no physical events, so we've tried to replace them with virtual events. It's very hard. You can't do sales presentations physically anymore. There's a lot of things that have changed. You can't entertain clients. You can't bring them physically together to help close deals. There's a lot of things that right now you simply can't do that were in the toolbook in February 2020. So what's stayed the same?
I always have been, one of our operating partners calls it an aggressive marketer, but I don't know if aggressive is the right, I hope that's not what it is, but bold.
Bold. I like bold.
Bold, and really put a lot of value on creativity and creating experiences that no one else was creating or could create, and invest a lot. I'm a recovering, I guess, field marketer at heart, and to me the best field marketing is just so creative, so detail oriented, really experience driven, highly relevant to the audience, and it doesn't really matter the medium. And so I think it's kind of cool that we have a new opportunity and challenge to surprise people.
So let's talk about your circumstances and and I love this. You're talking to, a reformed guerrilla marketer from way back. Talk to me a little bit of how you've applied that thinking and sort of, we'll call it relevant, surprising experiences that you've been able to create in the last several months.
Sure. So I guess, first of all, Drew, why don't I walk you through my, week of the week in March that COVID hit and what we went through, and then I'll talk about kind of what we're doing more on the field stuff. But one of the things that I recently released a book called No Forms, No Spam, No Cold Calls. The next generation of account-based marketing and selling. This wasn't really meant to be a book. It was actually an experiment that my team and I did together called Project Bold Moves. About a year and some change ago, we decided that we could create a much better prospect experience, because prospects are future customers, but we tend to treat them like dirt. We make them fill out a form so we can get their email, so we can spam the hell out of them, so we can put them on a stuck leads report, so sales then has to cold call. And I'm somewhat exaggerating to prove a point, because none of us would say that's our experience. And of course, we try to be better. But the fundamentals of the experience are built on marketing automation technology, which sort of propagates that. And so I had this aha with my team, because I come from customer experience, and a lot of us came from a company called Aperio, where we lived and died by customer and employee experience. And I said, let's apply what we know to MarTech and to marketing. And we are going to design and really try to create an experience with no forms, no spam, and no cold calls. And those are our values. Does that mean we don't email? No, we still email. Does that mean we don't call? No, we still call. But there's a difference between a warm call and a relevant call and a cold call. And all this, I end up later we wrote the book on it. But so first of all, we defined what we meant by when to use a form and not to use a form, spam versus email. So we defined it all out and made these our values. We selected technology to enable this. We organized ourselves around it, and we proclaimed to, the sales team and the BDR team that this was going to be our process, and we were going to prove that we could actually outperform or perform better than we ever had using it, which we did.
Okay, so let me pause you a couple of things for a moment. One thing I realized that would help is, can you describe 6th Sense in 10 words or less for us, just so that audience knows, if they're not familiar with your brand, what you all do?
Sure. We are an account engagement platform. So the core is a account insights engine that provides a ton of data about accounts, both anonymous activity and known activity. So basically, 6th Sense can tell you things like what your prospect is researching, where they are in their buying journey, who's on the buying team, are they even the right account for you to sell to, what the next best action you should take is. And then it helps you trigger sort of multi-channel orchestrated experiences. So that's the core of what 6th Sense does.
Perfect. Okay. So now what it sounded to me like, you all were sort of drinking your own champagne and figuring out, how do we, with these values of no spam, no forms, no cold calls, you're still using your technology. And in fact, you're probably showcasing it pretty carefully, I would imagine.
Oh, we went hardcore on our technology. And what we believed were tangential technologies. But yes, everything, and so I have a saying, no segment, no creative. So what does that mean? Marketing, and this is back to the more things change, the more they stay the same. Great marketing starts with the audience. What about that audience? How did you select that audience? What makes that audience bespoke? Like, what would appeal to that audience? And so in 6th Sense, that's a segment, right? But and we can slice and dice and look at, segments of one account or segments of 2,000 accounts. And so our marketing approach all starts with a deep, rich understanding of the audience. So that's the foundation of this project. We ended up proving it and working on a book. So
So
Yay.
but before you say, so proving it, we got a bunch of marketers here. They smell, they know what success sounds like. Describe what successful results really meant to you.
Yeah, so we have a revenue operating plan. And if you start to unpack that, you layer on all of the inputs that are required to hit our number. One of them being a qualified account at the top of the funnel. So how do we think about qualified accounts? Another being conversions, cycle time, win rates, deal sizes, all of those things. And so we made some assumptions about that model, and about how we would be able to impact and improve that model. And basically that's what we set out, and that's what we did. And that materializes in a pipeline quota that has to be met every month in order for us to meet a bookings target that's doubling but the key is at a CAC of 1. So just doubling, we can't just spend wildly.
Right.
All of our other SaaS metrics also need to be in place to be able to double and have, the kind of SaaS metrics that companies want.
Now, a CAC of 1, often I hear, because that's language that is used by startups. Well, CAC it's total, it's customer acquisition cost, right? It's CAC, right? Mm-hmm. Just confirming, right? So if that's the number,
well, it's really magic. Yeah, our magic number is 1. So
magic number meaning I can spend $1 and I can acquire a customer for essentially that amount, or
yes.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a very, in my mind, that's a low number relative to what I hear from other startups where they have to, in order to get more money, they need to have a CAC of 3. So that's a good thing for you because it's a lower bar if it's 1-to-1, or am I missing something in the math here?
Well, the whole thing about magic numbers, it depends on your stage, and it also depends on your industry. But if it's too efficient, then actually what the magic number would say is you're not investing enough.
Right.
If you subscribe to this.
Right. Got it. Okay. So if I were to summarize this, you sort of put your own product and theories to test. It worked in the sense that you hit your target of delivering pipeline, which turned into revenue, and you did it at a dollar value that met the goals of the company. Is that a fair?
Correct.
Okay, excellent. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to dive into, so what'd you do? And let's break this down. Where is the creative marketing that you've been talking about? Okay, stay with us. Okay, we're back, and we've just talked about applying this. You know where you want to go, but what'd you do?
Well, so here's what was interesting. So we had written the book, and the whole idea is all of July. Well, actually, before that, we wanted to do a CMO breakfast roadshow. So we started that. We had field kickoff, which is my favorite week of the year. And then immediately after that, I got on the road and I was hitting, 3 or 4 cities a week doing CMO breakfast, talking about this project. We hadn't launched the booklet, but basically sharing the results of no forms, no spam, no cold calls. So I'm traveling all around the country, and the one is in DC, and I get out of it, and Sydney Sloan is canceled, the Sales Loft conference, and all these things are getting canceled, and I'm like, oh my God, we're gonna be toast. So got home, the team is freaking out. You cannot go on LinkedIn without seeing some BDR or SDR gets shamed for, trying to sell and doing the outbound motion. And we have a very heavy outbound motion. And so everybody is just totally panic stricken. I'm panic stricken. I don't know what to do. And I'm like, oh my God. And everyone's saying, you have to sell with empathy and you can't do any automated outreach and da-da. And I'm like, oh my God, guys, we have to sell with empathy. We can't do any automated outreach. And then we took a pause. So I said, it was like a Thursday or Friday. And we're like, you know what? Everyone just do nothing. Like, I just need to figure out what's going on. We'll get back to you on Monday. But what was interesting is when we came back together, everyone was like, well, we don't do automatic emailing. We sell with empathy because of our process, which requires you to know that they're in market. It requires you to understand the ICP fit. It requires you to know the keywords they care about. So all of the things that we put together, we were like, oh my God, it's like we've been preparing for this. So we could just kind of keep rolling on, which was really interesting. So that was kind of that. And that was kind of the more things change, the more they stay the same. I would say from a creativity perspective, then it became, okay, we were doing these breakfasts. We've got a bunch planned, we're not stopping. And so literally that Tuesday, like I was in DC on Thursday, came home. The next Tuesday was supposed to be Boston. And we had Uber Eats breakfast cards delivered to people's house. We just did the breakfast virtually, but I was like, we're not going to talk about this Project Bold Moves thing that no one cares. Like everyone's freaking out. Again, back to knowing the audience. Let's talk about what the hell we're doing. And so we got on and it was about 30 CMOs and we just all started jamming on what's going on. And it was all, no slide. It was literally like being together, like workshopping and talking about what was going on. And people were like, can we do this again? And so then we did it again. And we invited the crew that came to Boston to the one that we did in New York. And then they were like, oh my God, let's do this again. And so then we just started every Friday. So every Friday now I host a coffee talk, one on the East and one on the West with Matt Hines, who's my partner in crime on it. And we crowdsource at the beginning of the week, the most relevant topic. So what is most relevant right now this week? So we covered Black Lives Matters. We've covered, virtual, pivoting a big event to virtual. We've covered how your budgets have changed. We've covered, basically the most relevant topic gets voted to the top. Matt and I scramble around and find kind of an expert or someone to facilitate and share an experience to kick it off. And then it just goes. And, it's now 500 plus CMOs. We have a bunch that want to join, continue to join every week. We get about 100 across the two coasts consistently. It's now a Slack channel. It's a content hub. So people have been so awesome about sharing. Hey, this is my, Christina from Moz had a huge virtual event and she did a post-mortem on it and shared every detail, what worked, what didn't work, with this community. So the more things change, the more they stay the same because we crave learning. We crave shared experiences. We crave collaborating with peers. And so it's just a matter of facilitating that. So that's an example.
Very cool. Do you have another example?
Well, we've been, so another example, which kind of surprised me was, the book launched and, I had this, I had this vision of going on this awesome book tour in July and hitting every cool rooftop bar.
That would be fun.
You know, I love a good rooftop bar in the summer, right? So I'm like, perfect. The book's coming out in the summer. We are going to go to every awesome rooftop thing, launch the book. It'll be so fun. It'll be great. Well, again, that's not happening. So we were trying to figure out, like, how do we create energy? How do we make it cool? How do we make it like a VIP experience? And what we ended up doing was picking a group of VIPs, mostly our customers and influencers. And they all got a cocktail kit delivered to their house. And my husband and I, we hung out in my kitchen, and my husband and I showed him how to make the cocktail. I talked a little bit about behind the book, why we wrote the book, just to kind of give him the why behind it. But then we actually had a concert. So we had Michael Franti give a personal concert for these VIPs. He did such a good job. I mean, it wasn't like just watching some random concert. Like, he did it for the book. He did it for 6 Sense VIPs. He really took his songs and like tied them back to concepts in the book. Everybody was so into it. We were all dancing in our kitchens and slacking, and it was just incredible. It was so much fun. So, you know, people still want an experience. They want to be able to get up and listen to live music and dance and bond and all of those things.
Very cool. In both examples, you're gathering people. You're bringing something to the table. You've talked about the Uber Eats and the drinks and so forth as sort of a gift and a thing to bring people together. I wonder in all of this if there, what you think the biggest lesson for you has been as a result of these experiences.
Well, I think it's interesting because it's easy to think a virtual event is like cheaper or easier. And while you don't have the big, heavy, trade show tax, which is awesome, it takes a lot more creativity and coordination and effort. So my field marketing team is busier than ever. Because these details matter, and the details are what differentiate a webinar from a virtual event.
Right.
And they're different. And that is the difference that's important. A webinar is a form of content. A virtual event is like where you actually get to know people and, there's an experience. And so I think that's what marketers need to really think through and understand. Because we're participating in a lot of the virtual quote unquote trade shows and events. And it really is just it's more like content syndication. So thinking of it more like content syndication than like a trade show, I think is how you have to get your mind around it, and also set your expectations around what you're going to get out of it and where it's going to play in your funnel. And that should dictate how much you pay for your sponsorship and things like that.
I've been to many virtual events, and they have been painful. And, you're competing with the email, and typically email wins, except with a couple of exceptions, one of which, Michelle Beebe, I don't know if you know her, she was on from Skillsoft. Her event was actually really good. And I really enjoyed and got a kick out of it. But the production values were amazing, and it was so different than some of the others that I felt like, okay, they figured it out. And then when you talk to Michelle, you learn that she had 123 different people working on the event over a 7-week period, and they put a lot into making sure every aspect of it was a great experience.
It's harder to make it cool. It's easy to do webinars. We can all do webinars. And it's okay to say you're doing a webinar, but if it's a virtual event, giddy up.
Right. You know what? It's always harder to be a little more creative. It's always harder. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about just the intricacies of marketing to marketers. So stay with us. Okay, we're back. And one of the advantages or disadvantages that you have is that you're marketing to marketers, and marketers are a creative group of people. They tend to really appreciate creativity when they see it. Do you think that that is helpful for you here, and an important part of what you're doing?
I I think there's two things that we have been very thoughtful about in terms of marketing to marketers. The creativity, which you mentioned, and that it is appreciated, and we get to push the envelope on it. And we have to, because they've seen it all. They've seen every swag catalog, they've seen every event pitch, they've seen, so they know it, right? So creativity, it does stand out, and it also somewhat attracts marketers because they kind of want to see what you're going to do to learn for themselves. What was your cab customer advisory board like? Because I'm going to take notes, because I want to be part of your cab, don't get me wrong, but I also want to maybe pick up some tricks along the way. So for sure, that has been an important aspect of Six Senses brand, and our philosophy is to, push the needle and be bold, and that's just who we are. I would say, though, the other, maybe more important aspect is marketers can sniff bullshit. They know bullshit because they're spinning their own stuff. And so one of the things that we've also been very, very thoughtful about is being very practical, less theory. So very practical about how to get things done. Very, very, you called it drinking your own champagne, but we're the prove it people. Like, we will prove it to you. Like, I don't advise doing anything that I haven't done myself. And that's really important. Most of our thought leadership content originates with something that we have tried and tested. And we're not going to write about it unless we've tried and tested it, and customers have tried and tested it, and it's really a best practice. So that's like a big part of, I would hope, what you experience when you work with Six Sense, is that kind of no bullshit, very practical, not theory. We're in this with you, we're doing it with you, testing, learning, and totally fine to admit when things didn't work too, because you learn more from your mistakes.
So I'm curious, as you've done these, as you call them, cabs, customer advisory boards, and these the breakfasts, how has that led to? Because I can hear the not the skeptics, but the Missouri CMOs saying, how did this pay out? Were you able to migrate these people from the salons, which are a great thing, to the breakfast, to business?
Well, so I guess I want to answer that question, but I also want to challenge what you're calling a Missouri marketer, that I think brand trumps demand every single time, and an investment in brand pays off over and over and over again, and has a multiplicative effect throughout the entire funnel, and lasts a lot longer than, I wrote a book called the easiest way to quote unquote create demand is to get a database and spam a database. So if that's what you're about, and that's how you want to measure your success, like, I am not for you.
So, okay, good.
Because that is just like not my game.
All right.
And I come from sales, so I'm very, very, I was a GM before, and I had a $280 million, practice that I was responsible for. So it's not that I'm not very financial oriented. I just think that some of the performance-based marketing metrics are ridiculous.
So amen to that. Now let's just talk about this from you're a CMO, you have CEOs and CFOs who give you budgets. How do you create the link from brand, which we all know and appreciate, and salespeople understand brand when they go in and they work for a company that nobody's heard of versus a company that they not only heard of but welcome into the door, right? I mean, they get it right away when they see that difference. How are you selling the brand notion and whatever measurement of that versus the demand, which, you know, in theory, in a world of digital marketing, is really easy to sort of to show?
It's easy to show numbers that don't make any sense. Yes. So I would say, again, because I'm a recovering salesperson, I have a revenue ops function that works across me, CS, and sales. And together, the three of us build our plan. And throughout that plan, there are assumptions about, you know, different stages in the funnel, different conversions, cycle times, AC, you know, average selling price. And the reality is, any smart executive knows that moving the needle on ASP is way more significant than a bunch of more MQLs. Moving the needle on competitive win rate is a lot more significant than a bunch of MQLs. Moving the needle on cycle time, more significant. And so the key is understanding all of those assumptions and understanding where you need to be. And marketing influences every single piece of that. And so that's where I wouldn't compare, for example, the book launch to a trade show. They're very different, right? So it's making sure that you understand where this fits in that operating model and what I'm trying to do. And then what plays are getting applied. And so I talked about no segment, no creative. Also, every segment has a business objective, and that's what it starts with. And the business objective may or may not be top of the funnel. The business objective might be win rates. It might be upsell. It might be renewals. So every single marketing play that we do starts with the audience and a business objective. And then we measure, did we hit it or not? But my team plays across the entire revenue model.
So there are a couple of things I just want to sort of highlight. One is this notion of marketing, sales, and customer service all planning together, which is admirable to say the least. But it also sounds like you all share the same metrics and one source of truth when it comes to data, which also makes sense. What I think is so interesting is essentially what you're saying is cycle time and win rates can be influenced heavily by brand. And so those things which are harder to measure than, say, demand, where you know, we again, as you said, we can spam the hell out of people and create demand, right? But you're not necessarily going to impact win rates or cycle time with that kind of approach. Did I just blend a couple of thoughts, or does that actually hold together?
Yeah, no, that holds together. I also believe that there's like demand creation, which is understanding the audience's pain and, you know, falling in love with your problem and positioning to the problem. That's creating demand. And assuming you have a good problem, assuming you really solve a good problem that's real, actually, if you have good data, you can light up and see who has those problems. And so then you're not really creating demand, you're actually capturing demand, which sounds like a nuance, but that's the mode that we operate in. So a big part of what I'm trying to do is understand the problems that relate to what we do, light those up in our ICP so we can see the accounts that have problems that we solve. And then it's about being very focused on targeting them, not just anybody.
All of it makes sense, and I'm with you. I'm wondering if these problems changed for your customers or your prospects in the COVID era. And let me show my cards on this in having talked to so many CMOs. Right now, the world is bifurcated into cloud economy and everybody else. Cloud economy companies are either initially were in the business of business continuity or are enabling digital transformation, which is, accelerated well beyond anything. And then there's really everybody else. And I describe this world of the CFO who's basically looking at every possible purchase as, will this either drive revenue today or will this cut costs? One or the other. And it's, this is in sort of wartime mentality of preserving capital at all costs and things like that. So I'm wondering, as you have been, over the last 9 months since we last talked, have the pain points changed at all for your customer base?
The pain points have become a lot more urgent. So, because if you think about one of the big things that we do is I talk about like preventing a gutter ball. So because we show you not just your ICP, so who are the best accounts to sell to, the ones that are going to convert the fastest, have the biggest ASPs, renew, which a lot of people don't understand, unfortunately. So that's huge right there to be able to, use AI and big data to be able to show you who is your ICP.
Can you, by the way, what's that acronym stand for, ICP?
Ideal customer profile.
Ideal customer, and ASP, because not everybody knows these are.
Average selling price.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, I'm sorry I interrupted you, but I know that.
No, this is so important. If people take nothing away from my nonsense, the ideal customer profile, because a lot of times people think ABM is about going after accounts and sending direct mail and doing all that. ABM is just as much about who you don't spend any time on as who you do. And it all starts with having a great ideal customer profile. We then not only tell you your ideal customer profile, because Drew, you could be a great account for me to sell to, like amazing. You fit every criteria, but you're not in market. You don't care. I don't want to waste a lot of time on you right now. So we tell you your in market ICP, your ICP. And what this allows you to do, and this is why CFOs love it, is they say, we're going to take majority of our marketing and sales engine, which is expensive as hell, and we're going to point it at the places that are most likely to buy right now. I know it sounds like it makes so much sense. It does, but we didn't have that capability without the data and the AI we can provide to marketing and selling teams. And so that then, you've got 40% more pipeline, 75% increase in conversions, 40% bigger deals, 50% better win rates.
All because you're just targeting, you've narrowed the target, you're only talking to the people who are ready to buy. And so that's pretty logical, and it makes sense. You're not boiling the ocean. You are, just targeting a very specific fish with a very specific need. Okay. I know we could talk for a long time, but our one reality of COVID is that my listeners' commutes are short because they're gone. So they're listening
Well, maybe
while
they're
they're,
jogging.
yeah, they might be jogging, and I get that. They're listening, they're jogging, and to you joggers, thank you for continuing jogging longer this episode. But I need to wrap up. So I look at this episode, and there were so many interesting themes. But one that came through loud and clear to me was that the need for creativity is driven more so than ever by the current situation. Is that you have fewer channels, but you can be more creative in doing it. That's driven by an understanding of your target audience. And again, the narrower the target, the easier it is to find an insight to appeal to them. The use of technology to help you find that target is where Sixth Sense comes in terms of using the magic of that, and that there is an opportunity. I thought the most interesting part of this was here is the CMO of a company whose its core strength is finding the data and helping you analyze it, and yet she's talking about brand. I think that's so interesting and so profound. And I want to end the show on that, because if you think you can be a successful CMO and only focus on the demand side, regardless of the economy, you're probably only doing half of your job. That's just me. It's me and Latané. So Latané, thank you so much for being on the show.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And to all my listeners, thank you as always for listening. Let me do this. Renegade Thinkers Unite is written and directed by Drew Neiser. Hey, that's me. Audio production is by Sam Beck. The show notes are written by Melissa Caffrey. The music is by the amazing Burns Twins, and the intro voiceover is Linda Cornelius. To find the transcripts of all episodes like this one, suggest future guests, or learn more about quite possibly the best B2B marketing agency in New York City, visit renegade.com. And until next time, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.